Hello, Guru Nation. Welcome back to the podcast. If you're listening, it's Random Musings from the Clinical Trials Guru, episode 276. If you're watching on YouTube, this is just another of the many videos and interviews we're doing. Today, I'm fortunate to have, again, Elizabeth Weeks-Rowe, a extremely experienced CRA, an educator, a thought leader in the space when it comes to monitoring. Someone who's been on the podcast before, but I know, Elizabeth, since our last interview, we have way more people now. Each time, it's like more people. Many of the people who watched our previous interviews already work in the industry, and people tend to not watch as much when they're already in. But now we got a new wave, fresh blood, never heard of you. Although you're very involved with ACRP and SOCRA. So why don't we get into, first of all, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Let's get into your story a little bit, your origin story, who you are. Let's talk about the book you wrote, the first book you wrote, about more of your biography. And then let's get into some of the things that are important to the industry, at least in my opinion. So who are you, Elizabeth Weeks-Rowe?
I am happy to be here, happy that we have our connection. It's great. And thank you for all the educational content you post, because you make it so simple, straightforward, but interesting.
Thank you.
And that is just so beneficial for new people. I love telling my backstory because it's funny. Kind of a trial by fire assimilation to clinical research. You and I share that in common. I have a nursing background. I walked into a very well-known clinic in San Diego to apply for a nursing job, and I left as study coordinator. And it's kind of funny because I still to this day remember walking out thinking two things. Thinking, number one, I think I got the job, and number two, I'm not quite sure what job it is. And I'd like to say the recruiter saw something in me that was so potential, but I think she saw a pulse, honestly, because what they failed to tell me was, I walked in and they said, "Do you know anything about clinical research?" And I said, "No." And the recruiter said, "Would you like to know?" And I said, "Absolutely." And I was speaking from somebody who was looking for a change, maybe a new therapeutic area for nursing. And when I used to think about clinical research, I thought about Albert Einstein, wild hair behind a microscope, right?
Yeah.
And then this whole door opened for me. And they didn't tell me that they hadn't had a coordinator for 6 weeks. And I'm glad they didn't, because quite honestly, had I known, I probably would have quit. And thank goodness because I walked in, and this is back, I'm going to date myself now. This is back when they had paper CRFs, 3-part NCR.
Yeah.
And literally walked into an office that was floor to ceiling in CRFs. And didn't know what I was doing. I had a great PI who had me had a monitoring visit scheduled my second day on the job, and everyone was in arms over this. That's not fair, blah, blah, blah. But she was very, very smart and innovative, and my monitors trained me.
Yeah,
and,
wow.
I learned a lot of things the hard way, but it was a great way to learn, in that once you learn something, make a mistake, fix it, you don't forget.
Wow.
And it's 19 years later. I've been in study startup for about 8 years. I do site evaluation, training. I teach at CRA at a clinical research training academy, and every 6 months, clinical research fast track. Don't know if you've heard of them. And then I also have written a book, and I've done a couple of updates to the CRA's Guide to Monitoring Clinical Research. But I'm going to get this in here. Got your book.
Yeah, thank you.
Get Dan's book. It's awesome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, your origin story, each time I hear it and I read it in your book. What's your book's name? I should actually have it here. The first one you wrote.
Clinical Research Trials and Triumphs, a heartwarming novel following a nurse's journey into clinical research.
That's right. We give that book out to all of our students in the CRA Academy, and now we give them ours as well. So there's 2 books we have. But that's a really, like, your origin story. So you were the only coordinator at that site, right?
I was the only coordinator at that site.
And were there a lot of studies, or you were just walked into a couple of ongoing studies?
I walked into about 5 ongoing studies.
That's a lot. Even one
Yes.
is too much for someone inexperienced.
And I had a great PI and I had great monitors. I'm not even kidding you. Like, mentoring has been kind of interwoven into my philosophy of clinical research and training and everything I've done, because I've had some awesome mentors. And to this day, my first monitor became my first boss when I became a CRA, because I became a CRA probably about 9 months after I was a coordinator.
Oh,
And
that quickly.
It was, to me, it seemed like a long time, because, like, I think you and I talked about this before. Within 3 months of being a coordinator, typical me, I was like, I want to be a monitor. Of course, I didn't even know how to fully do a coordinating job yet, but, you know, thinking ahead.
9 months? I didn't realize it was that quick.
Yeah, it was like 9, 10 months. It was, to me, it seemed like a long time, but in retrospect, it wasn't. But I had a lot of help from my monitor, and she became my first CRA manager, and she, to this day, is still a friend and a mentor. So mentoring and clinical research, 19 years later.
Is that site still around, the site that gave you your first shot at research?
You know, I don't know. I haven't been back.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to see. Maybe you'll be assigned to monitor there.
You know, I haven't monitored in a while, so I haven't evaluated them.
Okay.
I haven't been in touch, but I would hope that she was still in the industry and, you know, doing her thing, because it was a great experience.
Interesting. It's amazing how, and you know that story you just, basically your origin story of starting out with no experience at a site and immediately being thrown into the fire, which is what happened to me as well. I mean, it still happens today in 2019. Like, you hear this all the time. There's new sites, and when you go monitor, you can see it's obvious when you go to a site to do a visit how experienced the coordinator is. I mean, within 5 minutes, you can tell. So it's crazy to me how so much responsibilities are put on study coordinators.
Yes.
And a lot of times study coordinators who have no experience whatsoever. It's just mind-boggling that it still happens, but that's just the way it is, and I don't see it changing, really. I see more studies coming out, and then you're having research-naive physicians, and we'll get into where we both think, and this is just our opinions, where the industry is headed. But I wanted to get into your career trajectory, because a lot of people, and so you mentioned 19 years ago, so the year 2000 is when you got in as a coordinator.
Correct.
That was I think it was an economic boom, right? Or that was right before the .com bubble burst. So I guess it was, I mean, we're in a good economy now. I'm trying to draw parallels to how things are now. So you got your shot basically because you said yes, and they must have liked you. But what surprises me the most, and I don't think this happens today, is becoming a CRA within 9 months. I don't know if that would happen in 2019. Do you think that would happen?
You know, and forgive my haziness because I'm dating myself. It was like 9, 10 months. I remember it being close to a year, but yeah, that's still kind of a short time. You know, I tell people this a lot because I'm contacted by aspiring clinical researchers who've either read the book or read something I've written about, you know, never give up, mentoring, etc. Some people are going to apply for jobs and it's going to take them 4 months to get a job. And some people are going to apply for 2 years. And there's no way to quantify why, who, or what. It's timing, it's personality. I don't think it happens. I think it takes longer more than shorter. Like my time was kind of short. And typically I see, especially in this day and age, at least 1 to 2 years plus. But I think the most important thing is not to give up. If you get, and I tell people this, and I know it sounds cheesy, but I mean it 100%. You'll get it. You just have to keep trying. You cannot be discouraged if you get rejection notices. I was vigilant. Yep. I remember when I was a coordinator and I identified what I wanted to do, and I thought the first thing I need to do is show my enthusiasm, show my diligence. So I remember this fully. I was walking out of the clinic and my monitor, my two things. Walking out of the clinic, PI called me. She says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm walking back into the clinic because I know you need me to help you with something." And that was like kind of the attitude I had, like, this is my shot. I'm not going to put myself in this narrow parameter. Nope, it's 4:30. I'm going home. Second thing with that attitude of just going for it was my monitor said to me, remember interim analysis when instead of hitting the send button and the CRFs get transmitted electronically, I was talking to someone about this the other day, and this might be before your time. We had to pull pages, make sure we made the FedEx drop by 5 o'clock on Friday.
The
for
triplicates.
The analysis.
Yeah, the triplicates. I remember that. I wasn't a CRA, but the first year I got involved in research full time was 2005. And that was right when they were starting to shift everything to EDC. But my first two studies I took over were all paper CRFs, and I remember the monitor. I didn't understand what they were doing, but that's what they were doing. Later, I understood, wow, that's a very inefficient way to do things, and then they switched to EDC shortly after. Yeah, that's people don't remember that.
And I didn't mean to interrupt you, forgive me. The funny thing about that is, the second part of that is, I remember my monitor, the one I mentioned, who has been such a good mentor, she said to me, I said, "Are you okay?" And she's like, I'm behind. Typical story of a monitor during the interim analysis. I'm behind. She's like, will you help me pull? Can you stay to help me pull pages? And before she finished her sentence, I said yes, because it was an opportunity to learn. It was an opportunity to network, and it was an opportunity to show her. And I'm not saying that act in and of itself helped me get a job, but I worked hard enough to gain confidence, and my monitors wanted to help me because I showed them, hey, I may not be the best coordinator in the world or the smartest, but I'm the most enthusiastic. And I was so excited. I just go for it. And I encourage people. Enthusiasm, diligence, will take you so far. So kind of a long answer to your question.
No, it's very important for people to hear. I mean, to me, you're preaching to the choir, but for everyone listening and watching, this is valuable information. Just having that, it's the attitude, you can tell also the attitude within 5 minutes whether you're going to enjoy working with someone or not. If you are trying to climb or work your way up the industry, I mean, it's very, very conducive to and the most beneficial way and the best strategy for you to just say yes to everything, really.
Yep.
I mean, within reason, but say yes most of the time. That should be your default, and just do things. Because imagine if you told that CRA, no, I don't feel like doing this. It's not my job. Which, believe it or not, many people, that would be the answer, right? Like when they asked you to pull pages, no, that's for you. I'm not going to do that. But because you did that, she became your mentor, and I assume helped you later on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, people need to hear that.
Well, Dan, and you know this too. It's like I'm not 100% always fake it till you make it, but I was talking to someone about this the other day. Say yes, and then figure it out later. Don't turn away opportunities, because you never know. You never know what it could turn into.
That's right.
So, I mean, it's so true. And I'm sure with all your successes, I'm sure it's comprised of you. Yes, I can do that. And then later on, you're like, okay, how do I do that?
I still say yes, and I should be saying no. Like, once you start getting enough opportunities, then you could start saying no. And I still have a problem saying no. I have to work really hard at that. But as far as your career trajectory, okay, so then you became a monitor.
I did.
Give me a synopsis of what you did. Like, how many places you worked at? Did you move anywhere else? Why? Just give me that whole thing.
Yeah, no problem. Over 19 years, I think I've probably worked for 5 different companies. Not to name them, as I know you understand. I worked for one CRO as a CRA for 4 years, and then I moved to another CRO to do more of a training SWAT type position.
Mm-hmm.
And then
what's SWAT for the people listening? What is SWAT?
Back then, and I don't know if it's changed, it was a SWAT type monitoring where you would go in and either do like site evaluation visits or help do a couple monitoring visits co-monitor. You just had to be flexible and have enough therapeutic background experience that you could be given a study training, not too quickly, but fairly quickly, and feel comfortable enough to go in. And it was a neat experience. It was also training CRAs. It was kind of a hybrid role of pre-study visits, site evaluation visits, SWOT monitoring, and teaching CRAs in the classroom, which I loved. And then I had an opportunity to become a CRA manager. And I did that.
Very good.
I did that for about on and off for about 3 years, and I really enjoyed that. At the end of the day, I missed training and I missed clinical operations in the respect of I wanted to visit sites more again. So that's when I kind of moved to startup and doing more startup activities, investigator relationship selection development, that kind of stuff.
Interesting.
So, yeah, and I've done a lot of things and I've learned a lot of roles, and at the end of the day, I think my greatest love is being more with sites and helping and mentoring and visiting, because I've gone to big institutions, I've gone to research dedicated sites. There's so many good sites and so many good researchers, and it's such a pleasure and honor to meet them. And I've met some of the coolest people in the world. That's how I met you.
That's right. I remember.
Evaluation visit. Like how many years ago? Like 6 years ago?
Wow. So, yeah, that was 2014, I think. I remember.
Yeah, and that was awesome. And I remember I had seen your videos, a couple of your videos, and then as I was waiting for the coordinator, you were filming.
Oh.
And I looked and I went, that's that guy.
That sounds about right, actually. Interesting.
That was so funny.
So
yeah. So anyway, go ahead.
So you said you haven't monitored. Like, what is your role now? I know you said you train. You teach on the side as well. You're involved with. Is it ACRP that you're involved with?
I am involved with ACRP in the respect that I have the pleasure of writing for them sometimes.
Okay.
I write articles for their publications. It's not a continual gig, for lack of a better word. If I write an article and they deem it worthy, then they'll publish it, which I'm appreciative of, because and then I've done the series guide. I've done the updates to the 2016 and 2018 updates to the series guide to monitoring clinical research. The original authors were Dr. Karen Wooden and John Schneider. So they wrote the book way many years ago.
And that's what Center Watch. That's huge. Like, people don't understand now because Center Watch got acquired by NIRB. But Center Watch, like, for the last 2 decades, was the publication, the source for people in the industry to get their education. So writing that thick book that you have, it's in the other office. I should have brought it. I mean, that's impressive. That's so. Besides those things, are you working, like, you're not monitoring now, but are you training other CRAs, or what are you actually doing?
Just like I said, just not to be vague, but just like study startup, investigator evaluation, and just that kind of stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah, and do you mind if I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
So last time we spoke, you still had a monitoring gig. Do you still do that?
Yes, I do. I have a contract CRA gig with a Korean CRO.
Okay.
Whoever is curious can just go on my LinkedIn and they'll see it. And I'm doing that for a number of reasons. Number one, I wanted to know how to better train my students when they come do the internship, because we have a CRA teaching the CRA Academy, but when they come intern, students always ask questions. Hey, what does a CRA do in this case? And before, I didn't know. Up until 3 years ago, I didn't have an answer. Now I have answers for all of them when they come through. Okay. Another reason was I need to learn how to build a small CRO from the ground up. And these guys did a really good job. They grew really quickly. They work with strictly Korean sponsors. There's a huge market for what they do. So it's kind of similar to what I'm trying to do with my own CRO, as far as working with very small biotechs, trying to get equity early, trying to get advisory shares. It's very similar. And then I wanted to learn about oncology. So that's another reason why I'm doing that. But yeah, it's been actually, I think I'm lucky. I work for a really good company. But yes, I've been very fortunate with that project or those projects.
I think it's good that you do that because you keep yourself current. And it's difficult to speak on a topic if you haven't been in the thick of it, as they say, for a while.
Keep your hands dirty.
Yeah, and not to change the subject, but I wanted to bring up something funny, and it's kind of along the lines of what you were talking about enthusiasm and diligence. So when I wrote the book that I wrote that sold about 10 copies, I'm teasing. Your first effort doesn't reap the rewards you want, but it's still a good experience. So I picked some people that I wanted to send my book to, some influencers. You were one of them. And I had a plan because I thought, if I don't promote myself in the book I wrote, no one's going to pay attention to me. So I sent you a copy. I sent some other people a copy. They were gracious enough to, give it a shout out, and that helped build momentum. So I once again, if you don't put yourself out there, no one's going to do it for you. And you can speak to that. I mean, that's what you're all about. So
that is beyond what, I mean, that's the only thing someone like us can do. We're not behind a huge corporation that's going to push. And even if you are like a published author with one of the big publishers, they still expect the authors to promote themselves. So even if you are with one of those big publishing houses, they're still going to expect you to do it. So it's no different with us. And that's a great example of, enthusiasm, doing more than what's required, more than what is normal. I mean, if you want abnormal results, you can't do normal things. Like that's exactly. People need to realize that. So you're a great example of what someone can strive to become from, in 19 years, and you were probably a key opinion leader in the CRA space even 5 years ago, right? So it didn't take 19 years to become influential like you are now. I mean, it probably took 10 years.
It took to be able to become a writer and get published and have the good fortune of, speaking at conferences. It was a kind of a slow, steady, keep trying, get this, this publication published me after monumental edits. and then I sent writing samples to Center Watch and they were open. And then that relationship developed. And I talked to someone else about this. Like, it's all about putting yourself out there, developing relationships, and then keeping the relationships going and positive and professional.
That's right.
Because, you have to keep trying. So that's exactly right. Probably about 10 years.
It's important for listeners and viewers to know that, because a lot of people assume things all the time, and they're usually incorrect, but they assume they could be a CRA right away, which is usually false. They
right.
assume that once they're in, that their opportunities are limited. Like, I can either be a CRA or a coordinator, which is also very wrong. I mean, there's dozens, if not hundreds, of opportunities, different job titles, different career paths you can follow. At DIA, where I just came from last week, many, surprising amount of the vendors that were there, the tech vendors, the virtual trial companies, the EDC, all the different kind of vendors that are there, many of them were started by CRAs. So, really? Yes, a lot of them were. A surprising amount. So it's a matter of getting in, and then once you're in and you get your hands dirty and you get experience enough, you can see where the problems are, and those problems are actually opportunities in disguise. And then okay, if you're particularly interested in this particular area, you can form a company around that. You can become a consultant. There's a lot of people who do all of it. They're CRAs, they're freelancing as consultants, they're writing, they're training people, they're starting sites, they're starting their own companies. I mean, starting a site. CRAs, my biggest growing client base for my site network are CRAs. And these are CRAs that are still actively practicing CRA work.
Wow, I did
And
not know that.
yes, many
That
of them.
surprises me. I thought it would be like physician entrepreneurs.
Oh, there's a lot of those too. Yeah. But my biggest growing segment for the DSCS site network consulting is CRAs.
That's
And
so interesting.
yeah, there's a lot of different reasons. Some are just they don't like the burnout because it's a grueling job. I mean, your travel is part of it. Not to say it's not rewarding, but it's not easy to be a CRA. And so a lot of them are thinking, okay, I can only do this maybe 5 more years before I burn out. And I don't want to just switch to another company. I want to actually own something. So a lot of them go that route. A lot of them go the route of contract CRAs. A lot of them kind of do what you did and kind of do a mix of everything, like, influencer, speaker, publisher, consultant. There's a lot of different areas you can get into. And it really boils down to what your interests are. And because where you're interested in is where you're going to put in that extra effort and be enthusiastic about doing it, right? So it's important to understand what you're interested in, but when you're starting out, you have no idea what you're interested in because you don't know.
You're so true, and that's so true. And one thing that I think you and I have in common is, you started, and I don't know when you started doing your podcast. How long ago was that when you started doing all of this?
The YouTube was 2010.
That's a long time. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But you bring scientific merit, real world concepts of monitoring clinical research in a very understandable manner that's very innovative, creative, and you kind of that's your thing, right? And I am not a scientific writer. I mean, I can write technical stuff, but I'm more of I think of myself as more of a storyteller.
That's right.
And what I enjoy and what I was able to try, and it worked because I could have failed miserably, was combining my knowledge of clinical research with the ability to maybe write a creative story in a manner that's relatable. And that's what I wanted to do. And I've had the good fortune of being able to do it. And I'm so thankful because it's been such a great ride.
That's right.
So.
That's what a lot of people, there's so many opportunities here, and we're going to get into a little bit of where we think the industry's headed. But once you're experienced, it almost doesn't matter what the economy as a whole does. I mean, obviously, it's easier and the opportunities are more bountiful when the economy is good. But like when the economy turns, like if I may ask, how did the Great Recession affect you, if at all, in your career?
No, that's a great question, and it did affect me. Thankfully, I did not get laid off, but around 2008, 2009, I was working for a smaller CRO, great company, but everybody, big companies, big pharma, small CROs, actually I have to say, and I won't say who they were, but they were an excellent company because they did everything they could to keep people, and I'll never forget that. So hats off to that company. I had to work in a couple different roles to stay employed. One of them was business development. And to be honest with you, I'm so glad that I did that. It wasn't for me long term, but it taught me the importance and the difficulty of marketing, selling, approaching clients, all that. I mean, it taught me the fundamentals of relationship development, initiation, and management. And I'm super thankful because I was able to apply that to when I wrote the book I wrote, Clinical Research Trials and Triumphs. I knew how to get emails out there. I knew if I sent 100, I would get one reply back. And it just taught me how to do that. So I'm super thankful for that experience.
That makes so much sense. That makes a lot of sense now that I have that extra context of your other roles, like biz dev. I mean, yeah, that's all sales. That's all rejection. You're exactly right. Like 99% rejection when you're trying to get studies for sites, whether you're trying to get clients for your consulting firm, whatever it may be. It's 99% rejection, and that's okay. I mean, you're in it for that 1% of the time, which makes it all worth it.
Right. I've been really fortunate to work for some great companies, honestly. Like every CRO I've worked for has been phenomenal. Thankful for it. So it's all what you make, but there's some great sites and there's some great companies out there, and I really mean that.
Yeah.
So
part of the reason why we wrote that book is I think the best protection against any economic environment in terms of keeping one's career safe is becoming a generalist. So learning different aspects of clinical research like you did, right? Biz dev, coordinating, monitoring, training. I mean, you're a generalist now, and this is why they bring you on to speak, and this is why you become an influencer. So, but nobody starts as a generalist because nobody wants to hire a generalist. Like, you're going to start as a hyper specialist somewhere, and many people stay in that role, and that's fine if that's what they like, but they are vulnerable with technologies, with the economy. Those can all affect that particular role. So to diversify, that means to do more. Again, back to how we opened up this interview with, right? Do more than what's asked. Learn more on your own. You're not going to get paid extra for doing it. You're going to work more, but ultimately you're protecting yourself and you're expanding your career.
I couldn't agree more. And you know, it's so funny to talk about the economy. Now we've kind of gone, you know, when I started, there were more positions and CRAs to fill them. Then 2008, 2009, 2010, boy, did it change. Yeah. Contractors were looking to get hired full time. Companies were laying off people. And now, again, it seems like there's more positions than people to fill them. So it's very interesting to see it come back.
Always cycles. Yeah. It comes back. I remember the Great Recession. I had my site open for 4 years, starting to do really well actually in 2007, 2008. 2009 was my best year on paper up until that point. And then so I thought it would just continue like that. And I was watching, because I'm interested in business, I was watching CNBC. I was hearing what they were saying about the financial crisis. And I thought to myself, I was a little arrogant too, or stubborn maybe. That's not going to happen to me because I'm in research and that's real estate and that's, you know, it has nothing to do with me. I'm going to open 2 more sites. And then the end of 2009, early 2010, we lost a bunch of studies. And these were the studies that I was counting on for my new sites. So I learned the hard way as well. But now, I'm glad I went through that. We rebuilt, we restructured. But the next time a recession comes, I'll know, okay, you don't expand into a market that's turning down. Like, that's just really stupid. But back then, I didn't know. I had to learn.
Yeah. And, you know, it's so funny because you are very successful, but we thought, I think before 2008, 2009, I think we thought we were immune because previous recessions, it had not really affected clinical research in some aspects of the medical field. And then that was shocking. Sites were closing, companies were laying off. I mean, that was very eye-opening, and I think as unnerving as it was a very good thing. Like you said, lessons learned, right? No one's immune. So
nobody's immune. Teaches you how to get real practical. And by the way, I had 0 CRA skills back then. All I had on my CV was coordinating and then owning a site, which no employer wants to see, like that you're a business owner. So
I understand that.
There was no plan B really. That's a good segue now. So DIA, all the talk was about consolidation amongst sites, getting site networks. Chris, who's my business partner, we're going to do a podcast on this topic. Site networks, the importance of maybe aligning yourself with a site network if what they're saying, if what the key opinion leaders are saying is true, that sponsors are starting to push for site networks, but good site networks, like quality sites, streamlined. Throw into that as well virtual trials, and then maybe having hybrid trials with the site networks and the virtual trial aspects. I mean, there's a lot that is going to happen in the next decade. That's the consensus, at least. So where do you see that, and then how do you think that affects CRAs? And again, this is just your opinion, but I mean, your opinion is as good or if not better than anyone I know because you've been doing this so long. So where do you see the role of a CRA in this new world of virtual trials mixed with, I guess, consolidation?
No, it's a great question, and I'll speak to what I know. Don't know a lot about virtual trials, just a little bit, but I can
Nobody,
speak to.
everyone knows a little bit. That's it.
I can say that, and I've said it before, technology's dramatically impacted clinical research. I remember back in 2000, we had a computer for EDC, and we literally had a computer for EDC. And I was a coordinator, and I had the computer for that EDC system for that study only. And then when I was a monitor, I had 2 laptops. So I know it sounds silly, but it's true. They didn't always have to carry 2 laptops, but I had to work on 2 laptops at a site.
Right.
So that's, and now we're doing, risk-based monitoring and a portal for every system. And technology's changed clinical research dramatically. And I think that they used to joke around about 7 or 8 years ago that pretty soon CRAs would be replaced by, robots.
Yeah.
Data from Star Trek, and obviously that's not true. I do think that remote monitoring, I remember 5 years ago, people would say that risk-based monitoring, it's just a trend. It's not going to last. Well, that we've seen that's not true with the approved, the guidance, the FDA guidances that have come out, and more companies are doing it. I'm not an expert on risk-based monitoring, but it's just like the remote monitor, the on-site monitor, that paradigm's changed. And I think we see one thing I did a little bit of research on was, for example, patient-reported outcomes and like devices. Let's talk about a wearable device that a patient would wear in a trial. So patient-reported outcome data, but the means of like Fitbits type devices, those kinds of things, they're playing more and more into clinical trial data gathering, and the patient's playing more of a part. So that part of research has changed as well. Now, virtual trials, I'd like to see how that plays out, because you said a very intuitive thing before. You said, we're all figuring it out. Mm-hmm. And I guess a question I have for you, if you don't mind, because I saw at DIA you were speaking to someone about it. Have you participated in a virtual trial, or do you know the model they're using for virtual trials that's more accepted? What are your thoughts?
Couple thoughts. I'm trying to see how to not get in trouble.
I didn't mean to
no.
ruffle the waters.
No. I think I'm safe enough because I've talked to like just about every booth there, so no one's gonna know who I'm talking about. So with virtual, no, I have not worked on a virtual trial yet as a site or as a CRA.
Okay.
As somebody who's starting to get into the sponsor side of this industry, which is, I think, the next decade of my career, we're going to maintain and keep building the site network and all those things. But a lot of my focus is going to be on sponsor side and developing, hopefully, my own IP, or at least a very small part of my own IP.
Okay.
To me, as a sponsor, it's very attractive to do virtual trial. It's cheaper. This is all in theory. Cheaper, faster. You could make mistakes quicker. You could fail the study faster and not waste money. So I see why. It's the how that I think is going to be the biggest issue. So in the pilot studies and then in the phase 4s, so the bookends, I think you can do it. I think the phase 2, I don't see how they're going to be able to do a phase 2 virtual trial. Phase 2 are the most important studies, in my opinion. I know phase 3s are considered pivotal, and that's the one that's used to send to the FDA. But phase 3 is just a bigger phase 2. So I think the phase 2 are critical, and I don't see how, maybe I'm not smart enough, I don't see how we can do virtual trials or even hybrid on many phase 2 studies. Okay. Now, some of the people I talked to at the DIA, it's interesting with the virtual trial. So all the big CROs are getting behind this, right? Like, they're at least experimenting with it, some more than others. What they're really trying to do is eliminate the research-naive physician, which is kind of what my business model is built on, in a way, is we're going to train your research-naive PI. So I have a dog in this fight, and it's on the other side. But what these CROs are trying to do is get fewer PIs in each state. And then this is where the consolidation fits in. So having that site network, but then utilizing, because you still need to get the patients from somewhere. I mean, they're not going to be virtual patients, right? So you have to get the real patients from somewhere. And many of the physicians who are very experienced in research, they don't see private practice because all the financials are in research now, not in private practice. It's just It's crazy how that works. But I know so many doctors who quit their private practice once they figured out how to build a profitable research center. There's tons of money you can make as a physician, and a lot of these doctors are just doing the private practice to feed their research. They're not doing it because it's a good business model, because it's not. So these patients still have to come from somewhere. They're going to come from real physicians that don't really have a lot of experience in research. And what they're trying to do is get them as sub-investigators to plug into the experienced PI, and that's what they're calling a hybrid model. So obviously there's also the virtual part of sending the phlebotomist to the patient's house, wearables, all that stuff I can see. That makes sense. But when it comes to PI oversight, they're trying to centralize that, and they're trying to centralize the coordinating aspects of that as well. So what the companies are doing now, it's very early, is they are gathering data for the CROs, for the big CROs. So they're trying to get as many physicians' EMRs, electronic medical records, into their platform. And they all have different kinds of technologies. Like they all say this is proprietary, this is the best, this one does this one does that. Doesn't matter. The concept's the same thing. They're getting the EHR, the records, in real time. So the next time that physician sees the patient, not for research, just sees the patient in their private practice, the CRO's database now gets updated with more data, right?
Oh, wow.
It's de-identified. So it could shorten the feasibility process. And this is kind of what you do now, or maybe I'm wrong, but you were mentioning something about investigator feasibility. So it could make feasibility very transparent, right? Like a site's not going to lie anymore and say we have this many people in our database when the CRO can see your database in real time, and as of yesterday, this is what you had. So I see that working. I don't see the incentive for those physicians to do this other than receiving a stipend, which just between you and I and anyone else listening and watching right now is not very much. So they're not getting enough physicians to buy into this. So I think the site networks are going to be tasked with kind of doing what I'm doing with the research naive physicians. But rather than taking the time to educate them on how to become a PI and all that, they're just going to say, hey, let's plug in your patients to our database. And a lot of these physicians are going to say, okay, because they think, they want to do research. Well, no one's actually, in my opinion, no one's going to take the time to train them on how to do it properly, because all they want is your patients, right? And a lot of the big CROs are doing this, or at least experimenting with it, some more than others, without getting into any names. And I talked to all of them that were there.
Right.
They all have this on their radar, right? So this is the next step. We'll see what happens. I don't see how, your local neighborhood non-research physician would be interested in letting someone scan their EHRs on a regular basis, but maybe there's some kind of financial incentive to do that. So that's the next step. And then if that is successful, what they will implement is more of a consolidated model of research in the different communities. So having an experienced PI in every metro area, and then having all these inexperienced physicians but treating real patients, kind of sharing their patients for the system. That's the idea from what I've been able to gather. Who knows if it's going to work? I mean, that crucial step is getting those research naive physicians interested, which is still a tough thing to do.
it seems like it's very interesting, and it seems like you've amassed quite a bit of knowledge in a short time about it.
Yeah, 1 week.
TBD, like TBC, to be continued, meaning we'll see how it plays out, because I think you make some good points. I can't really speak to it. It's all new to me, but it's very interesting to hear you speak about it.
Yeah, and some of the big CROs, I mean, they're interested in and not all are as invasive as, let me scan your doctor's EMRs.
Right.
But they are talking about, okay, if this guy's research naive, we can plug him into one of our preferred sites in our site network as a sub-investigator. So it's kind of the same thing as scanning their EHRs indirectly, right? So
Understood,
that's the strategy from what I'm seeing. But this is 2019. By 2022, who knows whether this is successful or not. It's kind of like risk-based monitoring. You heard a lot about it a couple years ago. Guess what? Most of the monitors that come here are still doing traditional monitoring 3 years later, 4 years later. So a lot of these things that they want do not actually successfully pan out.
And I think you make a good point. I think there's a wave of something, and it's the next big thing, and it's going to take over. And then when the dust settles, I think it takes over a part, but then the tried and true, and I'll tie this into, let's say, Dr. Wooden and John Schneider, who wrote the CRA's guide and who did, all the updates and everything until I came in and just updated. I didn't have to update. I mean, I updated a number of things, but quite a bit of information was relevant, and I didn't change the core stuff. I couldn't, because I didn't write it and they were so brilliant, but the core stuff did not change. And I think that's clinical research in general. The core stuff isn't going to change that much. It's just going to be updated, implemented, improved. You know what I'm trying to say.
The fundamentals are still there, no matter what the technologies are. I agree with you. I totally agree with you. But as a sponsor, now again, like I said, I'm getting into the sponsor stuff. It is attractive. Like, oh, you mean to tell me that I only need one site instead of 10 to pull off my first study? And if that study is successful, now I can raise money and do a traditional phase 2? I'm all in. Like, let's do virtual. Let's go virtual all the way. But pulling that off is a whole nother story, and I don't think it's that easy.
I don't think it is either. I'm interested to see how that plays out.
Yeah, we'll see. I think there's something there with the hybrid, with sending phlebotomists to the patient, with getting the drug delivered to the patient, the way Pfizer did back in 2010, right? But they did it again. It was like a relatively simple indication, like getting the patient. They ran Google AdWords to get the patients interested. And that's a whole nother topic we didn't even talk about. And that's actually the industry's biggest problem, is the industry has a branding issue when it comes to patients. Like, if you go on the street and talk to 10 people at random and you mention clinical research, they're all going to have, maybe 9 out of 10 are going to have negative something to say about it. Even though they have no experience with research, they're going to say, because the word itself, oh, you're going to experiment on me? No thanks.
Exactly.
Guinea pig.
Exactly.
So the industry, until they fix that, all this other stuff is just, they can try whatever they want. You need the patients, and you're not going to be able to clone the patients. They are doing a digital twin, which we're getting real sci-fi, but that's decades from now, not now. But that you can kind of bypass the patient. But even then, you need the original patient's consent to scan 3D models of all their organs and stuff. And that's if the FDA accepts that. But we're getting on a whole nother different tangent.
But it's very interesting.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I still think that there is I don't want to say misnomer, but misconception to some people, clinical research, oh, I'm a human subject. Yeah. I mean, they're even getting away from using the word subject because it's not the connotation is not, I think, positive. And I can't give you valid data on, oh, they are getting away from subject, but more and more, if I've looked at, protocols or informed consent documents over the past 5-6 years, that word is not being used as much. That's just my personal experience.
Yeah,
and even I've tried to do it. I say patient. I'll correct. If I'm writing something, I'll say, nope, don't say subject, say patient.
It's
think it's
funny.
just more, yeah.
It's funny because when you talk to your PI or a coordinator about the patient, you never, as a site, say subject. But when you, the site, are talking to the CRA, you do, because you know that the CRA doesn't know that person. So it's just a little weird mental thing that, at least for my sites, that's kind of how things have played out as far as the lingo. But yeah, patient centricity, and then getting patients to collaborate on creating the protocol, getting the patient influencers to do that is a good idea, because regular patients are not going to trust Pfizer, right? Pharma are like the most hated companies in any industry. I think it's like at least top 5. So you're not going to gain the trust of just Joe Sixpack, because you're Pfizer and you have a study. Like, that's not going to work. So they understand that, and I think that's what the whole patient centricity thing is
Right.
It's trying to get real people to help spread the word and improve the brand. Even that's going to be difficult, because what are those patients getting paid? Like, these influencers, all this remains to be seen. I think you can't get away from the doctors. Patients trust their doctors, and I don't see any other way other than getting research-naive physicians excited about research to really make a dent in the patient recruitment problem.
I hear what you're saying, and that's something that I think is so important. And that's another topic we can talk about if you'd like, because I know that you have a PI training academy, or do you have a site owner academy?
Site owner academy, yeah, and a lot of the people in that are physicians that want to be PIs.
Okay, and I think that I once wrote an article about this. What impresses me, if I go to a research a site for an evaluation visit, and this has happened over the course of the past 10 years, what impresses me the most is when I know right away that a site has a new PI, and it's a breath of fresh air when I go to a site and they say, the coordinator has 10 years of experience, we have an infrastructure, our PI is new to the role, and he's either been a sub-I on 5 trials or he's taken XYZ training. And I've been to some sites who are like, they gave me a folder of the entire PI's training curriculum that he's taken. And it's so impressive to have that transparency. And then some sites have taken it one step further, where they will have a mentor, an experience. One time I went to a site and the PI was being mentored by another PI whom he met and worked with on, the first screening visit. The PI would call, or he would be there just guiding him, and that kind of stuff. Like, I don't necessarily go to a site and when I see a research naive physician, that's not a red flag at all to me, because if a site has taken the necessary steps, like gone to a training academy or done online training, that level of due diligence is super indicative of how they're going to be. And so yeah. I love that there are PI training classes and courses, and I love it when sites go above and beyond to really mentor and foster and show the sponsors that this is our physician. He's naive to research, but he's done this training, and he's a therapeutic expert in hyperlipidemia. So he doesn't know how to conduct a hyperlipidemia studies, but he's done 8 million treatments in just examples like that. I love it when sites do that, and I see that more and more.
Yeah.
So that's a nice thing, and it's an important thing.
And they see the patients. Like, you want to make study criteria, inclusion, exclusion criteria harder or more difficult? Well, you're going to need just that alone tells you you're going to need more top of the funnel patients. They're not going to come from an academic center or a doctor who does only research, maybe 10% private practice just to feed the research. You're going to get that from community clinics that are doing 90% private practice, and then they want to start getting into research. And the concern is with those guys and gals, well, data integrity. But then you look at some of these key opinion leaders, their data is not very good, but they keep getting studies because they're getting the patients in, or they're KOLs, right? So there's a lot of hypocrisy in the industry, but we'll see what happens. I mean, my thesis is we need more of these research naive physicians getting into research. And I think as study supply keeps increasing until the next recession hits, and then, you know, who knows what's going to happen, we're going to need more PIs in, right? The pie's getting bigger. They're not, new people are not coming in to take from you. The pie's growing. You have yours. You're going to get more also, but we need these other guys in there as well.
I agree. I do. I think there's a lot more opportunities, and there's a lot more opportunities for people to enter and learn and train the right way. We don't want PIs doing the trial by fire simulation that we did.
Yeah, that was brutal.
It was.
You and I pretty much started the same way.
Yeah. Hey, do you mind if I ask you a question about your book?
Yeah, the book is fantastic.
It is.
I'm kidding. I don't know. The audiobook is fantastic.
Well, I mean, I know that two questions about it, because I wrote my book, Clinical Research Trials and Triumphs, 5 years ago. And I learned a ton about, I did, self-published on Amazon. It was a ton of work. So glad I did it.
Yeah, 5 years ago. I told you 2014. I just pulled that out of my head, and it was right on. 5 years ago.
You were right on. It was November 2014, so almost exactly 5 years ago. So it was a lot of work. I'm glad I did it. I learned important things about copyright and, marketing and getting an artist for the cover, all that.
Yeah.
But marketing it was like a full-time job, right? I mean,
yes.
I was up, my husband's so patient because I was like every weekend up late. So you did yours self-published too, is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Now, do you yourself do a lot of the marketing?
I
think you do. You do, right?
Yeah, 100%.
And you've written, this is like your sixth book, isn't it? I mean, you've written a lot of books.
The other books I don't really count as real books. This is like my first real book I wrote. Those were little like small books. They're now all for free. And even back then they were like 99 cents on Kindle. I was just using it as a lead generating tool. But this is the first real book we wrote. Okay.
And how long did it take you to write it?
So outlining it, I had an assistant who kind of went through all of our academy material, the Site Owner Academy, the CRA Academy, and then some key videos and webinars that I told him to focus on. And he went through all the, poor guy, his name's Lucky. This book could not have been done without Lucky. Like he went through every single piece of content that we told him to, which is like 30 hours of videos. Right,
wow.
To put like an outline together. And then he wrote, that took him 3 months to do. So yeah, 3 months. Then he gave me that outline, and then I started going section by section, and then Chris took some of the sections. Chris is the co-author. That took about 4 months, and then we went back and forth on the revisions. We hired an editor. We had Lucky come back in after it was done to put in references. And then we had somebody come in to do the images and find all the reports and templates and all those kind of things. So it took about a year to put it out, like to hit publish. I want to say a year plus or minus like 2 months.
Okay. Mine was about 2 because I didn't do it full time.
Yeah.
I did it, a lot of it, weekend, evening, here and there. I didn't hire an editor. My mom was my editor because she is excellent at editing.
That's good.
And she went, bless her heart, she went through every chapter. And I don't think she would do it again for me. But it was a great experience. But it was interesting. Thanks for sharing your process, because great book and really good material to give to people easily. So
thank you. And it probably would have taken me 2 years too if I didn't have Chris, who's the co-author. So that shortened it in half.
Okay.
But I think right around 2 years is what I would have done if I would have gone solo on this thing as well, which, I mean, I will write another book, but not for a while. I'm going to take a break from writing because that was too much.
And, I've had people say, because I kind of left my book on a cliffhanger. Not a big cliffhanger, but a little bit of a cliffhanger.
Yeah, you got to write your next part. You got to write the next part.
I know. And I've had people say, when are you going to write the next one? But you know what? It is so much work. And I'm not saying I'll never do it. Of course I will. But it is so much work that I'll do it, but I can't say when because it's just the time. I mean, it is not just oh my gosh, it's so much, like, it is insane amount of work. And I don't know if my husband will put up with that again. I'm just kidding. He would.
Yeah, my wife was putting up with that too. Yeah, that's really, I mean, I was up like 3 a.m. writing, just because
Yes.
for me, like, my best writing comes like late at night, not during the day when it should. Yeah, it's grueling. It's a grueling process, and then reading the book on audiobook, it was fun, but it was also extremely strenuous because I hate reading in public. I read all the time, but I hate reading out loud, like, to be clear. I speed read most things. So, like,
Right.
to read this thing in a normal pace was really tough to do. What the fun part was, Chris did it with me, and then we went off script for half of the book. So it's like 2 books. We read it, and then we stopped like every paragraph and talk. So it's like a podcast.
Oh.
It's like a conversation we're having now if
Yeah.
we would have just read like a paragraph and say, hey,
Oh,
Elizabeth,
that's a cool idea.
what are your thoughts on this? And then we would just go off on that and then go back to the book. So that was fun, but also exhausting as well.
Oh, I can't imagine doing that. But you guys, like, pinging off each other and the ad libs and your thoughts on the content. That's a great idea.
It's fun. The audiobook was the fun part. I'm gonna write another book. I don't know on what yet. It won't be a textbook like this one's kind of a textbook.
Right.
I think it'll be more of a story either about sports or something in life sciences, but it'll be more like a story about someone else and not about a topic.
Right. Oh, that'll be interesting. I look forward to when that happens.
Yeah, well, wait a while. I look forward to yours too. I think you should do
Yeah,
one
wait a while.
you said 2014, so 2024 you should do a 10-year anniversary part 2 to your book.
That's a great idea, and who knows, maybe we'll both have our books out by
2024. That sounds about right. That's
yeah.
It's
That's far enough off, so it doesn't give me like worry to think about it. So that's so funny. Thank you for answering that question. I was just curious about that.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, thank you for asking that, and thank you for coming on to do this podcast. It was a really great episode, very fun. We hit on things that we're both very passionate about. Yeah, and hopefully somebody watching or listening gets some kind of value out of this. It doesn't have to be everything, but just if you get something out of it, apply it, do something with it, whether you're new to the industry, not in yet, or even experienced. There's a lot here, hopefully, for everybody to find something. So thank you very much for sharing your expertise and knowledge with us. I'll have links to your book, right? Your first one, the one with it's like your biography. I'll have links to that. That's a fantastic read. The other one, the CRA's Guide to Monitoring, is also really good. It's like this thick. We'll have links to that as well. Thank you, Elizabeth. Are you speaking anywhere else soon? Anytime soon?
I'm not. Probably not this year.
Okay.
I'm back at Clinical Research Fast Track in December, teaching, and then next year, hopefully, maybe a couple more conferences, but to be determined.
TBD.
But yeah, I love that. TBD. But Dan, I just want to say thank you. It's always a pleasure, and thanks for everything that you do, and thanks for having me.
Thank you, Elizabeth. We'll be in touch. We'll do more of these every 6 months or so, maybe.
I would love it. That would be great.
That's good. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. Thank you, Elizabeth, and we'll catch you all later. Bye-bye.
Okay. Have a good day.